He's, it always does that. He's president on our board of trustees, and he's teaching classes, and he has some coming up. He's a hard worker, and he's very dedicated and committed to this church. So it is my pleasure to welcome my good friend, Reverend David Shaw.
Thank you, Reverend Carol.
You're welcome, brother.
Thank you, big sister. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Reverend David.
The National Spiritualist Association of Churches, or NSAC, because I want to say that as few times as possible, created the spiritual principles that we read each Sunday and are encouraged to follow in our daily lives. Today, I'm going to talk to you about Spiritual Principle 8, which states, we affirm that the doorway to reformation is never closed against any soul here or hereafter. The NSAC website has a simplified version of the spiritual principles that used to be known as the children's version, but that was changed sometime in the past 3 years to simplify. Spiritual Principle 8 is simplified to, every day is a new beginning. I will discuss that interpretation later, but for now, I will give you the interpretation from the website that was written by Joseph P. Whitwell, the third NSAC president. He wrote, we discard entirely the terrible, wrong, and illogical teachings of eternal damnation, and in place thereof, we accept and present for consideration of thinking people like yourselves, the thought of the continuity of life beyond the change called death. He said, we discard the teachings of eternal damnation. According to my spirit guides and teachers, there's no such thing, so that's a good interpretation. Mr. Whitwell says instead there is a natural life where the opportunity for growth and progress to better, higher, and more spiritual conditions are open to all, even as they are here on the earth plane of life. My guides and I agree that we have the opportunity for growth and progress because that's the whole purpose of this free will experiment that God created for us. I believe that God created free will experiments in this universe and other universes, all the multiverses, to see if we would grow and evolve and get enlightened and become as one with God. That's the whole purpose of this thing, in my opinion, and some other people that I've read. He continues, we accept no such teaching as a hellfire, but we do teach that sin and wrongdoing will necessarily bring remorse and suffering that would be difficult to describe in words and which can only be relieved by the individual's own efforts, if not here, then in the hereafter. To me, this is a simple explanation of the law of cause and effect. Our actions have consequences. And there are several people learning about those laws with Reverend Lisa and Reverend Marie on Wednesday nights. Spirit told me to put in a plug. Mr. Whitwell says, if we make our own lives better while here and that of our neighbors happier, we shall unfold that happiness and make heaven on earth, which we shall carry with us into the spirit world. And that is an example of the law of attraction, or like attracts like. If we do good deeds, we attract good to ourselves. Now, Principle 8 was adopted by the NSAC Annual Convention in 1909 when they met in Rochester, New York, and it stated at that time, we affirm that the doorway to reformation is never closed against any human soul here or hereafter. It was revised in 2001 when they met again in Rochester, New York, to the current wording. We affirm that the doorway to reformation is never closed against any soul, here or hereafter. Couldn't find it, but I wonder why they removed the word human. The NSAC does not recognize reincarnation, so they can't be saying that when we come back as an animal, we can be reformed. No one has proven the existence of aliens or walk-ins, so it can't be that. If I ever find out, I'll let you all know. I did want to know when Joseph P. Whitwell was the president of NSAC, and I found references to him being in charge in the 20s and 30s. I have seen a list of the presidents and their time of service, but I couldn't find it when I was writing this sermon. More importantly, I found the following article written by Pastor Karen L. Heasley of the Spiritual Path Church in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. It states in part, African Americans were attracted to the spiritualist movement in the years following the formation of the NSAC in 1893. A few talented mediums emerged. Unfortunately, in the 1920s, Jim Crow laws and calls for segregation put pressure on the NSAC. In response, African American members were organized into colored auxiliary societies of the NSAC. When racial tensions increased following World War I, the NSA leadership worked to create a separate all-black spiritualist organization. The appointed president, Joseph P. Whitwell, led the first meeting held in Cleveland, Ohio on April 21st, 1925. 20 delegates attended the meeting, but 6 withdrew to protest the establishment of a segregated organization. Our philosophy doesn't discriminate, so they were in the right. The remaining delegates formed the National Colored Spiritualist Association of Churches, NCSAC. At a second national meeting in 1926, they adopted a new constitution following the NSAC's Declaration of Principles, which we read every morning. Religion is alive and well, Joseph P. Whitwell said. A correct understanding of the laws of nature on the physical, mental, and spiritual planes of life and living in accordance therewith will unfold the highest aspirations and attributes of the soul, which is the correct function of true religion. The NCSAC included churches in Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, New York City, and elsewhere. By 1938, a mere, not even 30 years later, there were 51 black spiritualist churches in Chicago alone. That's back when spiritualism was at its peak, when there was like 3 million members. Most black spiritualist churches combine spiritualism, including spirit guides, with Protestant and Catholic beliefs. Church names identify the Christian orientation of congregations. For example, the Divine Israel Spiritual Church identified with Black Baptist churches, and the Infant of Jesus of Prague Spiritual Church featured Catholic saints on their altars. The civil rights movement of the 60s eliminated the need to segregate churches, and the NCSAC continued into the 70s, but its status today is unknown, and I couldn't find any references to it anymore. That article was posted in May 2018 on what's the name of that church again? Spiritual Path Church website. I found another version of that same article on encyclopedia.com attributed to a couple other authors. So who's plagiarizing who is my question. Now I want to get back to the simplified version. Oh, I had to do that aside about African American churches. Joseph P. Whitwell was African American. He was the third president. Spirit said, that's important history, especially for Detroit, which is a mixed city. Just excuse me?
Diverse.
Diverse, integrated, all that stuff. Now I want to get back to the simplified version. Every day is a new beginning. I interpret that to mean every day, every hour, every minute, we have the opportunity to make choices. The simplified form doesn't say what kind of choices. Now, granted, the previous two principles, addressing the golden rule and making our own happiness, do address that, but I think spiritual principle 8 does address morality when it says the doorway to reformation. So to me, the simplified form is a little lacking in direction. But it was written for kids. So if you still kept it the kids version, yeah, you could get away with it. But saying it's a simplified version for adults, I don't buy it. Now at this point, I thought I was done writing this sermon, and I had finally written one without including a single definition. But Spirit insisted, they started suggesting about Tuesday. They started insisting Friday. And yesterday they were yelling so loud, I had to sit back down in front of the computer. So according to dictionary.com, reformation is defined as the action or process of reforming an institution or practice. Individually, it can mean a sea change, metamorphosis, transformation, conversion, or innovation. And finally, it can refer to the 16th century movement for the reform of abuses in the Roman Catholic Church, ending in the establishment of the Reformed and Protestant churches. Roman Catholic Church abuses. Oh, that never happens. Chiquita, I'm not supposed to talk politics up here. She says it's ethics, not politics. So anyway, spiritual principle 8 uses the second definition, a personal transformation or metamorphosis. And finally, another thing that Spirit said to include, they were saying that loudly this morning since I ignored them yesterday. I told my wife, Patty, that I was talking about spiritual principle 8 this morning, and she said, that's an easy one. She then proceeded to give me a simple, clear, wonderful interpretation of spiritual principle 8. And I told her that I looked forward to her giving a sermon on this topic in the future, because I have no interest in borrowing her great idea and no intention of people giving me any credit for it. It was really good. If you ask her, she might tell you, I don't know, she might save it. Top secret. That's the kind of thing I would do, but she's nicer than me. So in conclusion, I just want to say that this is Reverend Carroll's favorite principle, and I think it is a valuable opportunity to become one with God, which is the point of this whole thing anyway. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention.